Today, Backrooms versus Obsession.
Ooh, deathmatch. Bring it. This is going to be good. What's up, everybody? Jim Cyril and Tanya Klein here from Coverage Inc., the leader in screenplay analysis, development, and editing services since 2002. And we got a very special episode right here. We're going to be doing some movie reviews head-to-head, right, Tanya?
Yes, we are. So the two big movies everyone's talking about right now are Backrooms and Obsession. And the reason everyone's talking about them is, well, of course, first of all, they're making a ton of money on fairly low budgets. Obsession was $750,000 apparently, and Backrooms was a bit higher, $10 million.
Yeah,
a tad bit, yeah. But most of all, both the directors have come from YouTube, where they gained a huge following, and it's the new paradigm. The new paradigm being that you find your audience and then you get your movie deal. Whereas in the olden days, you broke in, you made your movie, and the movie found an audience.
Yeah, it's a great end run around the gatekeepers at the festivals and, the labs and all of these things that generally tell people, who gets to get discovered, who gets to get played. So we're going to talk a little bit about Backrooms, then we're going to talk a little bit about Obsession, and then at the end, State of the End, where we give you our final analysis as to which one we feel was better and better written and which one is worth your money. And let's also say, starting right now, be aware there will be spoilers. Spoiler alert, folks, so we can't really talk about these movies without getting into the details, so you have been warned. All right, let's talk about Backrooms. Backrooms is about sort of a struggling, down-and-out furniture shop owner played by, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Ejiofor, yeah.
Yeah, sorry if I mangled that. Who discovers a Byzantine sort of trans-dimensional set of sub-levels underneath his store that, liminal spaces, as it were, that seem to go on forever. And it becomes the mystery of what is this space, as this guy basically spends the entire movie exploring these spaces and trying to figure out the secrets to the mysteries, which get darker and darker the further he goes.
My take on Backrooms, interesting, unique. Personally, I thought pacing-wise, we have some problems, namely that we had quite a few repeat beats of, yes, we're walking through the rooms, looking at the rooms, and then the next person, we're walking through the rooms, we're looking at the rooms. So I thought the repeat beats were unnecessary. The movie could have lost 15 minutes. Also, for horror fans, well, there was a lot of creepy atmosphere, but really not necessarily a lot of horror per se. Unique idea, I like it. My problem with this is the same problem I have with the mystery box storytelling. Sticking the landing, and I think a lot of people had complaints about the ending, simply because it's not really a definitive ending. However, I mean, my take is, and I might be wrong, it's the very Jungian collective unconscious, but we didn't really have character arcs per se, because we didn't really have a protagonist-driven storyline. In fact, we had a protagonist flip quarters through the movie. You could make the point that Chiwetel Ejiofor's character was stripped away just down to its shadow essence, to keep the Jungian terminology. So that was an arc of sorts. However, what was a bit missing was the protagonist-driven story, because apart from, let's explore this, what is the goal? What is, the protagonist didn't really have a goal.
Yeah, correct. There was no goal for the protagonist. There was a protagonist flip 3/4 of the way along. I honestly like the movie better than I thought that I would, Tanya, because generally I don't react very positively to movies that don't have a strong structure. But, what I was hoping for was that whatever themes they were trying to get at here would sort of unify it all and go back to, some sort of sense of deep psychological exploration as to, whatever was going on in Chiwetel's character's brain as his world falls apart around him. We realize that basically this, liminal space is sort of like a reflection of his subconscious, something like that. We never really got a clear answer as to what any of that stuff actually is, though. So, it left me a little bit out in the cold, but that said, it did hold my attention. But I agree with you. It kind of went on a little longer than it needed to go on. A lot of it was mystery box. A lot of it was just exploring and what weirdness is going to go on. I mean, it reminded me a lot of the Stanley Parable, the video game, if anybody's ever played that game, where it's just like endless, Byzantine corporate corridors where, the structures don't make any sense, with, MC Escher-esque, staircases to nowhere and things like that. And it's very clever and visual and innovative. I think, the design was one of the most interesting things about the movie, but it wasn't scary. I mean, at the very end, we finally get some revelations and some creepiness. There's a chase at the very end. That was kind of cool. But still, I don't know. I don't know if it all holds together. But let's save our conclusions for the wrap up.
Let's go on to Obsession.
All right, Obsession. So let's talk a little bit about the story of Obsession, which is really simple. It's a monkey's paw type story. It's the old sort of be careful what you ask for, make a deal with the devil, there will be hell to pay type of story that we've seen a million times before. And in this case, our protagonist, who's named Bear in the movie, has a crush on his coworker who's named Nikki. And, they're friends, and he's been friend zoned, and he's never going to get out of that friend zone. So he buys a little trinket at a curio shop called like the Magic Willow or something like that. Do you remember what it was called?
One Witch Willow, yeah.
One Witch Willow. Yeah, I kept having Buffy flashbacks to that one. And he's granted one wish, and of course he wishes that this girl Nikki, the love of his life, will love him more than anything ever, and that goes horribly wrong. It goes about as well as you would expect it to go in this type of movie. And again, there's no big surprises throughout the whole movie, but it was entertaining. Tanya, what was your take?
I agree. So the movie was entertaining. I mean, there was nothing new or unique or revelatory about it. It was basically monkey paw, MacGuffin. However, what I think really made the movie stand out when it comes to similar monkey paw-esque offerings is its sense of humor.
Yeah.
So there were some really, really, really funny bits in there. And I think that sort of levity, especially when it comes to horror, goes a really long way and works really well. And frankly, and I think it really appeals, we've talked about that, to a certain demographic, namely the 20-something demographic. And
right.
Thinking back to when I was in my 20s, only yesterday.
2 days ago.
That is definitely the sort of thing where I've seen relationships like that.
Yeah, well, so yeah, I think the movie was very smartly geared towards that age group. We know the creator, Curry Barker. He's 27, so he's in that age group. And this is a movie that we saw from the people around us in the theater. They were responding in the right ways throughout, gasping and oohs and ahs, because they could put themselves into the shoes of the protagonist and the people in this movie. So I think it hit exactly like it hit right. It hit where it needed to hit. And I think that's why people are responding to it more than like a lot of the other movies that are out right now, like Mandalorian and Grogu. Like, who can really relate to, I mean, Grogu's cute, but you know what I mean? It's like, but this was much more of like a fun, engaging sort of ride. Really, that's what it comes down to. Nothing super innovative about it, but it delivered the goods and kept you entertained throughout.
Exactly. So, final rating, Jim.
There's little nitpicks, screenwriting nitpicks, and a few things that are larger than nitpicks that I think we should point out. In Backrooms, I think, the key thing, like you alluded to before, Tanya, is we don't really have a traditional structure. We do have a protagonist. The protagonist then disappears, cedes the role of protagonist to his therapist later in the movie, and then she becomes our protagonist. And we, to be fair, we do have intercuts to her, and so, her story and her mom and her own issues throughout the thing. So it's not like it comes out of nowhere, but it is odd. It is an atypical, a traditional sort of structure. And I'm not saying it doesn't work, because again, it did keep me entertained, but a lot of it is just entertaining because I was like, okay, what's going on? Okay, and then when we finally do sort of find out what's going on, not really, it's like, okay, I guess that was worth the ride. I don't know. So I honestly think that a little bit more work could have been done in terms of, character development, character arc. You said you felt it had a strong theme. I'd be curious to know what you felt the theme was, because while I felt thematic things in there, I couldn't actually tell you what I thought the theme was.
Okay, so that is my interpretation, and I believe the director has not actually stated what his intent was or what he was trying to say. So my interpretation was the backrooms were the Jungian collective unconscious, and it's basically every person's bullshit that gets sucked into it, and that every person at some point has access to. So that was my interpretation.
Well, that's interesting. So in other words, in your interpretation, then we would all have back rooms. We just haven't discovered them.
It's our unconscious, where all of the bullshit that we go through in life, it gets put into like old furniture.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, I can go with that. And I think we do need to point out, Kane Parsons, 20 years old when he made this. I believe he got signed while he was still in high school, or got the deal for this.
He got the deal for the movie while he was a senior in high school, and and wisely decided to skip college and make the movie instead. So smart move.
Yeah, saved himself $250,000 there in tuition. Hey, dude, look, good for you, man. That's great. Look, I'll save my rating for the very end, but I think it was a successful movie. I didn't love it. I found it moderately entertaining. Now let's just sort of sum up Obsession. I think I liked Obsession better than I did Backrooms. I think it did a better job of just sort of creating a thrill ride that people enjoy. It wasn't as, innovative. It basically took, worn out, kind of tried and true concepts, but it found a way to make them interesting. And I enjoy that. It's sort of like, almost like comfort food in a way, whereas, Backrooms might be more like, a three-course meal, that sort of thing. Anyway, what do you think, Tanya?
No, I'm in complete agreement. So yes, Obsession didn't bring anything new to the table. However, it was a fun ride, and the humor that he was able to inject into it really, really, really helped the movie. And also, by the way, great performances. Great
performances. Yeah, the girl who played Nikki, she was great. The way she would just turn on a dime, personality-wise, and our protagonist, Bear, was really, a real everyman. There were 2 points, and again, these are such nitpicks. Really, I thought the screenplay was actually quite well done. But 2 nitpicks were, Nikki in Act 1 gives Bear the opportunity to actually tell her, hey, if you like me, now's the time to say so. And Bear says nothing, and instead chooses to, break the willow stick there and put her under the spell. First of all, she didn't need to do that, because that sort of implied that he might have had a chance with her in the first place without ever breaking the thing. And I think it would have worked just as well if she just shut him down. Like, yeah, sorry, dude, you're in the friend zone. Deal with it. And that's it. And the other thing was, the best friend, Bear's best friend in the movie, it is revealed later that Nikki has been casually hooking up with him. But the guy who plays Bear is a really handsome guy, and he's really kind of charming. And, I think any young woman in the audience would easily want to, hook up with Bear more than they would want to hook up with the other guy, who is just kind of a bit of a schlump looking. I don't know, just casting wise, it didn't really work for me. I kind of bumped on that. I didn't really believe it. I don't know. Minor things, Tanya. But all right, so let's get to our ratings. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put both of these movies?
Okay, Obsession, I'd go with 7 or 7.5.
Okay.
And Backrooms, I'd go with 6.5.
Yeah, I'm kind of right around there with you. I think I'd go with like a 7 for Backrooms. I think story-wise, I'd probably give it a 6. But it was interesting, and the concepts were kind of big enough that I'd give it a 7. Also, I think I'm still a little burned from Lost, Tanya, because it was the same sort of thing in Lost, right? Like
mystery box
storytelling. Exactly. And it's like, okay, where does this tunnel go? What does this mean? And at the end of it, it's like, oh, really? That's it? That's all you got for me? You strung me along all this way? 20 years later, my ass is still, got the scorch marks on it from freaking Lost.
I think more than 20 years, but yeah.
And Obsession, I think I'd give Obsession an 8. I think I'd give it an 8. Again, it's nothing that's going to be earth-shattering, but it's a good time in the theater. It's got some good scares, got some good gore. It's fun, and yet it's not so gory and scary that I don't think like the average moviegoer would go, oh, that's too much for me. I think it delivered on exactly what it needed to deliver. I think it's a solid 8.
All right.
For two, emerging filmmakers who basically bucked the system and found a way to get their movies done. Guess what? Both these movies are big hits while Hollywood movies are struggling.
They found their audience before they got their deals. Kane Parsons has a YouTube channel. He started Backrooms as a YouTube series, and got quite a bit of views, which is how he got to the attention of A24 that wanted to make a feature film out of Backrooms. And Curry Barker also had a YouTube channel, and he had his first feature, a milk and cereal, he made for $800 and reportedly, and put it on YouTube.
Yeah, which is insane.
All right. Well, if you have any questions, you can always reach us at info@coverageink, that's INK.com.
Please like and follow, click that little button right there, and please hit the notification bell, because that tells the algorithm that we exist. And we will see all of you guys in the next video.
Our stories, but mystery box. Look at like Star Wars. You got the droids. They meet the mysterious woman. Who's that? We don't know. Mystery box. Then you meet Luke Skywalker. He gets the droid. You see the holographic image. You learn, oh, it's a message. She wants to, find Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's her only hope. But who the hell is Obi-Wan Kenobi? Mystery box.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!